Cyberpunk is probably my favourite genre of fiction out there, and if it isn't, it's certainly in my top 3. There's something interesting about looking at science fiction through a complex and pessimistic lens. It not only gives off a unique style, but manages to make the infinite possibilities of technology cool, yet undesirable. That cyberpunk tone can get me interested in any form of media. All you need to do is slap on a cyberpunk label or have a producer mention the genre in an interview and bam, you have my utmost attention. That label is what gets me to watch and buy these products, from books to films to anime, and of course video games. And when you think of cyberpunk video games, you generally think of one of 4 franchises. There's the Shadowrun games, which are based on the tabletop games of the same name, System Shock, which was more of a science fiction game blended with the dark tone of cyberpunk, CD Projekt Red's upcoming Cyberpunk 2077, which is also based on a tabletop series, and of course, Deus Ex. Deus Ex is likely the most influential cyberpunk game series in existence, and it's the series that got me into the genre to begin with. My first game in the genre was Human Revolution, and it shows what I am both excited and nervous about in terms of future possibilities in technology. Transhumanism is cool, but the side effects terrify me. It's great that the series is still going strong after 16 years on the market, which is strange because every game in the series has never had a smooth launch. The original was released under the pressure of the company's image, the second was released under the pressure of corporate deadlines, the third game was released with some glaring problems that can be easily generalized as outsourcing, and the fall was awful. It's a series that has never been considered perfect, but even so are still considered some of the best games of their respective years, if not ever. Well, except for the second one and the fall. With that in mind, I am obviously looking forward to Mankind Divided. I've avoided information like the plague, and the only items I have seen are the questions posed to Elias Tufexis, as well as watching the announcement trailer, and the Mechanical Apartheid trailer that doesn't show gameplay footage at all. I want to be excited about the mysteries this game will present, so for preparation I decided to replay Deus Ex and Human Revolution before Mankind Divided is released. I'm going to be looking at these games through a modern lens with the added benefit of historical comparisons, and since I haven't properly played the first one all the way through, this has been a neat adventure for me. A little word on how I look at old games. I normally try to look at games in their original format without any outside interference from third-party software, because I think it's important to take a look at the original game as is. This means playing without mods, because even though modding cleans up problems and glitches that weren't fixed by the developers, I would rather experience the past as it was so it is easier to see how far we have come. And by God, we have come so far since the early 2000s. This game is old, as in really, really old, to the point that it looks older than it actually is.
Let it spill over into the schools and churches. Let the bodies pile up in the streets. In the end, they'll beg us to save them.
The first signs of age start at launch when you realize that it doesn't have a 1080p option. On my screen during the tutorial, the textures had a lot of artifact problems, and in the recording, which you can see on the screen, the UI flickered. At least until I changed some options in the INI files, then the game pretty much ran normally with some minor exceptions. The most notable one is that you can't see the title of the game in the main menu because the background is zoomed in due to the change of resolution. I didn't realise this until I looked at the bottom of the screen on startup, but it is a minor problem. At least the UI isn't cropped or stretched, and it hasn't affected gameplay in a negative way. What is very evident during my time playing this game is that not only is it fairly old, but the design methodology is also fairly old. Let me explain. When you think of RPG shooters, you might think of Fallout or even Deus Ex Human Revolution. The key difference between those games and, say, Deus Ex and System Shock is the way the shooter mechanics work. If you can pick up a new type of weapon and use it with proficiency immediately, then that is a shooter with RPG elements. If you can pick up a weapon, but the mechanics make you horribly inaccurate unless you upgrade the stats to basic training, then that is an RPG shooter. or action RPG if you prefer it to be called that way. Deus Ex is the latter, and that is because it wasn't designed as a shooter with shooter mechanics, which is ironic considering Iron Storm was founded by two innovators of the genre. But in this case, Deus Ex was designed as the spiritual successor to the original System Shock. That shouldn't come as a surprise, since the producer of System Shock is Deus Ex's director. Warren Spector has obviously incorporated elements of System Shock into Deus Ex. Its influence can clearly be seen within the controls, though admittedly with some minor changes. For example, SZXC was swapped with the now standard WASD, the lean controls are remapped to Q and D, and left click is to fire. That's quite simple, but here is the trick question. What button do you press to reload? If your answer is R, then you are wrong. R is to look up and V is to look down, and since you now have that information, if you answered F, then you are once again wrong. You can guess all day, but you will never get the answer. The button to reload is semicolon, and if you thought that was already confusing, the button to aim down a scope is the opening square bracket button. Fortunately, you can rebind the controls fairly easy, and that is nice, but the ironic part is that you won't want to reload anyway. There's a lot of things you have to unlearn when playing this game, and not all of them are positive. This is a game that came before a lot of things we consider the standard today were fully realised, and while a lot of us dream of the return of mechanical complexity and more varied gameplay, myself included, nostalgia can sometimes get in the way of what is practical. There are two key weapons when going stealthy in Deus Ex, the riot prod and the tranquilizer crossbow, and at first sight that might be an easy sell, prod up close and tranquilizer crossbow for range, except there's two things that potentially annihilate that train of thought. The first is the inconsistency of the prod, particularly towards the beginning. It acts more like a close-up debuff spell than something to knock people out cold. It stuns them, leaving them susceptible to more damage when attacking from the front, but get them from behind and you might have a much better time. It's more of a support weapon than something you use as part of your main arsenal. The tranquilizer, however, is likely the most useless weapon in the entire game. It's obvious from the second you successfully use it, when the enemy doesn't get knocked out but instead charges towards you, with nearby enemies possibly joining the fray. Even if you fire from the darkest parts of the level, you'll quickly lose interest in the weapon. I know because I abandoned using it come the second level. This means that if you are playing stealthy, then save scumming is not only recommended, but encouraged. These levels can last for a while, and since autosave isn't an option in the vanilla game, you might have better results completing the level by attrition, since a death at the wrong place can set you back a couple of hours. I'm not saying that autosave and checkpoints should be ever present, however, its absence does make the game feel a lot more dangerous. You have to manually save, so if you're replaying it again or even trying it out for the first time, keep that in mind. It's not as satisfying as, say, getting your game saved automatically when travelling in between hub worlds, but it is the only way to keep your progress. You're certainly not going to get much satisfaction from the hacking and lockpicking mechanics. I wish there was a little more substance to these actions that you repeat quite a lot, especially the hacking. I understand that I am looking at this with a fairly spoiled eye, one that has benefited from the unpredictable passage of innovation and technological advancements, but couldn't there have been something else to the progress bar to portray hacking? To be fair on the team, such a thing was tried out in the original System Shock, which felt more like a drug trip than anything, but some inputs that affect the outcome in minor ways would be a minor benefit to the game. At least the AI works, if a little inconsistently. They have very simple patterns and very basic responses, with their sight lines being very unclear. They'll see you, but sometimes you can stand in plain sight without the cloak augmentation on, and they won't bat an eye. They don't even get alarmed when one of their guys goes down, and they won't attempt to wake up an unconscious colleague, meaning that there is very little difference between a dead body and an unconscious body other than the handicap and your own moral choice. And then you have the voice acting. It's really, really, really strange.
Agent Navarra and I were ready to go in, but for no reason they said pull back. I do not retreat. Please give me a weapon and move out of the way.
It reminds me of Silent Hill 2 in a lot of ways, where the strangeness of everybody's line delivery gives off the right emotion when looking at them in a vacuum. Chemistry is non-existent and everyone sounds like they weren't in the same room during the recording sessions, and their lines come across as really cheesy when you factor in the lip syncing.
There's still a heavy NSF presence in the streets and we're taking some fire.
I wasn't expecting slick and advanced techniques being implemented since I was aware of Ironstorm's general reputation, but Half-Life came out nearly 18 months prior and their lip syncing wasn't that jarring. It's basic, sure, but it's a lot better than 3 static poses. So tell me, viewer, if the game is ancient in game design methodology, voice acting, technology, and is incredibly unintuitive in a million different ways, then why do I like it so much? The simple answer is that there is a lot of charm and attention to detail to everything, to the point that it is both one of the most complex and one of the most balanced RPGs in existence. The AI is simple, but it works in the same way that a Hitman game works. It's a complex mechanical framework that you can interrupt at any moment. Remember the crossbow that's next to useless against an enemy? Did you know you can use it as a long-distance noisemaker and sneak past guards? That's a tactic you can utilize, and it can get you out of very dangerous situations.
Got something. I'm doing a scan.
Every single level has at least 3 different methods of getting past enemies and completing objectives. The obvious way, which is just killing everyone in your path and making a lot of noise, the skill-based route, which normally involves hacking and lockpicking, and the stealth route, which commonly utilizes skills to flesh out the journey. This is reflected in level design and is designed to such detail to the point that you can legitimately get lost. If you go through one route or shortcuts, you will find another method that might or might not fit your game style, and when you do, it gives out a sense of wonder every single time. It's also a game with a lot of depth to the point where I am looking forward to a second playthrough. The first time you enter Paris perfectly encapsulates what I love about this game. It's the perfect vertical slice for newcomers, which is weird because it occurs at the mid to late game. There's a door that blocks your progress, and you can either lockpick it, explore the compound to learn more about the world you are in and unlock it that way, or you can simply blow it up. There's an inherent charm that comes with the potential lunacy that comes with our over-imaginative methods to solving problems. Every character is entrancing, barring the odd voice acting and the masterful lip syncing. What is wonderful is that every character has a beginning, middle, and end, with their tales coming across as a never-ending struggle in a fast-adapting world, rather than being one of overcoming obstacles. They're incredibly well written to the point that the actors' stilted performances don't get in the way with how absorbent it is. The complexity and niggles that are present within the first several hours become quirks you get used to, and you start to wonder why those problems felt so big to start with. There are modded versions of this game out there, one available on Steam with the blessing of the Deus Ex crew, but I am tempted to recommend skipping the modded version until at least going through the vanilla game once. That and the modded version changes some music, which is something I will never forgive. Seriously, this music is campy MIDI tunes that turn into head-bobbing beats. It's awesome, even if the changing tunes feel a little jarring.
You Dentons sure hung us out to dry.
The campy charm and its look into a cyberpunk future after an age of physical implantations is what keeps this game floating. Sure, it's not the best game ever, but it's certainly one of the most addictive, immersive, and endearing games ever created. Its minor flaws become cute, and it's a great snapshot of ambitious projects made at the turn of the millennium. That being said, there are 2 overly annoying problems I have with it, and one of them is something others have reported having a problem with. It's a swimming skill. It's the most useless skill in the game, and it's even more useless when you have the regeneration augment installed. The skill feels like an afterthought, and there doesn't seem to be any tangible benefits from investing your experience points into it. At worst, you'll take some damage, but not enough that you have to worry about dying. But while that can be repaired with the simple removal of some code, there is another problem that can't be fixed with code, since it's something built into the story itself. The Dragon's Tooth. This weapon can be equipped by anyone, and is something that is fairly easy to get your hands on. You get it midway through the game, and by the time you first equip it, you might as well say goodbye to challenge. I rarely had to worry about combat anymore, since some of the strongest enemies can be easily felled to 2 strikes of the blade, and, for the record, this is on medium difficulty. It's a shame too, since if it was reworked, then it would have nicely complemented the character progression. It feels like something you should get come the very late game, but instead you get it about a third of the way through. They're nitpicks, but it doesn't change the fact that the game is very enjoyable. Hell, if you've already played Human Revolution and have seen the trailer for Mankind Divided, you start getting the references that those 2 games make passing comments about. Some are even conveyed through imagery alone, and that makes me a little giddy. It goes to show that even if the second game turned out to be more of a miss than a hit, the people at Eidos Montreal are dedicated to suspending their disbelief to ride along with the more strange ideas this game has, like the Illuminati. It's an imperfect game, and it's also one hell of a fun ride. And now with some historical perspective in mind, I look forward to seeing how Human Revolution lives up to the franchise's name.
It's still going on, isn't it? They're shooting people right outside the bar.